Hello, I'm Jalen Taylor, the president of BCDI Colorado, and I'd like to welcome you to Denver. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Leah Austin, the president and CEO of the National Black Child Development Institute, and we are live at the nation's largest education and technology conference, ISTE. Thanks for being with us. Today on our panel, we will be exploring the ethical complexities of AI and the potential impacts, opportunities, and challenges for Black children and families.
Good morning. I am Dr. Leah Austin. I am the president and CEO of the National Black Child Development Institute. NBCDI, affectionately known as by its acronyms, is the nation's only national organization. We are a think tank that is focused on the unique attributes and needs of Black children and families between the ages of birth and age 8. We are located in Washington, D.C. All right. Who was that? I know it's over here. Yes, come on, D.C. I'm from D.C., so I appreciate a good D.C. shout out. Today, we are really excited to have this conversation with you all and to embark on a vital journey, one that will delve into the intersections of artificial intelligence, ethics, and the well-being of Black children. As we know, as we have spent the last 3 or 4 days here at the ISTE conference, we know that there's this fast-paced realm of technology advancement. And the ethical considerations surrounding AI have never been more urgent. As we witness AI systems infiltrating every aspect of our lives, from education to healthcare, and we feel a mixture of excitement and fear. Who feels both excitement and fear when you think about AI? We feel that it is imperative that we pause and we scrutinize the implications, particularly for those who have historically been marginalized and harmed in the pursuit of transformation. Throughout this discussion, we will navigate through the complexities of AI, ethics, and examining how the design, the deployment, and the regulation of AI technologies intersect with the lives of Black children and families. Therefore, we will explore a critical tension. This tension of ensuring that Black children have access to these technologies, right? Access is still an equity issue that we're dealing with. And at the same time, how are we protecting them from the harm and the danger of AI when it is created with negative bias or without them in mind at all? Our panelists of educators, advocates, and tech leaders will dissect these challenges and also propose solutions. From diversifying data sets to fostering inclusive development teams, from advocating for policy changes to amplifying the voices of Black children themselves, we are here to chart a course towards a more just and equitable AI landscape. As we embark on this exploration, let's remain mindful of our collective responsibility to ensure that the promise of AI is realized in a way that uplifts and empowers every child. Together, let us strive to create a future where AI serves as a force for good, a future where Black children can thrive, they can innovate, and they can shape their destinies without fear of discrimination or bias. I am honored to introduce our esteemed panel, a group of folks who have become friends, they are colleagues, and they embody the dedication and innovation in their multifaceted roles as change makers on behalf of Black children and families. First, we have, and by first I mean in the middle, Dr. Keisha King. Dr. King is the Senior National Education Administrator at T-Mobile and an NBCDI board member. Dr. King leads the T-Mobile for Education program that aims to bridge the digital divide in schools by providing affordable connectivity solutions and devices to students and educators. She is an advocate for education and technology and brings experience as a teacher and a principal to her role at T-Mobile. Next, we have Winston Roberts. Winston is a teacher at Kent, New Jersey. Along with his work as an educator, Winston is the creator of the Teacher in a Suit brand on YouTube and TikTok, where he provides resources and commentary to parents, teachers, and students on artificial intelligence, financial literacy, and other practical aspects of education. And last but definitely not least, rounding off this amazing panel is Jalen Taylor, who is the president of our affiliate here in Colorado, BCDI Colorado. Yay! Jalen is a visionary advocate at the intersection of technology, mental health, and community empowerment. In her work, she embraces the principles of Black futurism and envisions a future where Black voices and experiences thrive and shape the world. Please welcome all of our panelists, and let's jump into a really exciting and I do want to just make one note before I jump into the questions with this amazing panel and just share with you, there's a slide that will be rotating, which features the 8 essential outcomes of the National Black Child Development Institute. This is essentially a framework that we have co-created with experts across various fields on what would it take, what does it look like for a Black child to have a healthy development. So it's a framework for Black child development. So as you're listening to the panel, I just wanted to also provide that context so you know what you're actually looking at on the slide. And one of the outcomes that we have at NBCDI is that every Black child have a safe and appropriate internet experience, and that they also attend schools where they are affirmed and expanded. So obviously today, we're putting those two outcomes together in the conversation that we're gonna have. I wanna start off, I'm gonna sit down in a second, but I wanna start off by talking a bit about the tension that we mentioned in the introduction, right? This tension between access to technology, making sure that children, Black children, have technology in the first place, and then the experience that they're actually having with this technology. And so let's talk a little bit about bias in data, or biases in data, and what is known as the coded gaze. Does anybody know, is that term a familiar term to anybody, coded gaze? Okay, so the coded gaze says that the priorities, the preferences, and the prejudices of those who create the technology can shape the technology to be reflective of their gaze. It's kind of what we put in is what we get out, right? AI technology reflects the soul of the creator, is another way of talking about coded gaze. AI is only as good as the data it's trained on, and that is informed and built by people, and it reflects and learns from its users. So for Black children, this could mean a couple of things. It could mean facial recognition technology that fails to accurately recognize them, literally does not see them. And that can be shallow in one sense. We've talked about the impact of you're in the bathroom and there's a technology that allows the faucet to just turn on when you put your hands under. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands. But there have been opportunities, there have been times where as a Black person, you were sitting there for a very long time trying to figure out why this thing won't turn on. And we have learned that it is actually not you as an individual, it's in the technology, it's a bias. It does not pick up the melanin in your skin. So that creates this moment where you are in the bathroom a little bit longer than other people, right? That can be a very kind of shallow, maybe not so serious way that facial recognition bias can impact people. But then there are also more detrimental ways. We know that there have been cases of wrongful arrests because the AI the technology failed to or inaccurately recognize someone as the wrong person. Thinking about education, and we talk a lot about predictive analytics, and there's kind of this excitement about how that will make the job of an educator, potentially make the job of an educator easier. But what about if it's predicting classes that are offered or not offered without context for that student, without context about that student? It becomes in many ways another tracking mechanism that may actually be more detrimental and dangerous to Black children in particular than helpful. And we know that there are some AI tools that, if not made properly, will just not cater to the specific needs of Black children and their families. jump in with the panel and ask you, Dr. King, if you might talk to us a little bit about how we center the needs, the attributes of Black children in the design of AI so it's more ethical. How do we do that?
You know, one of the biggest things we think about is kind of why do we have to think about things in terms of specific subpopulations? And I think what's really important is to note that there are distinct differences in some of the things we have to consider as Black parents, for Black children, for people who actually are teaching and educating Black children. And so it's interesting because my husband and I were watching a show the other day on Netflix. And I don't know if anyone has seen it. We saw like the first couple episodes. It's called Your Honor. We're watching the show. And we got through maybe the first or second episode, and we started having this conversation about like our kids and what they needed to see in order to be prepared for the world. And then we started having a conversation that said, I wonder what people of other cultures are having a conversation about while they watch the show. And that in and of itself, that stream of consciousness and what you're thinking about and how you're perceiving what you're watching, in and of itself is what generates the bias when we're working on different tools. So it's not always this super intentional thing. It is genuinely the way we think and process our environment and the way we think and process the things that we're interacting with. And so think of AI in that sense. As it's being created, as it is being innovated upon, there are all these different variables that sometimes are just not at the forefront of the way that we see the world, right? And that creates the implicit bias that lives within the algorithms of the system. And so there are some really clear ways to create some solutions in this area. And I think a lot of it goes to obviously having diverse profiles that can train the AI systems, ensuring that students of diverse backgrounds are a part of creating these structures, which then goes to the pedagogy and the manner in which we teach, right? And how we're teaching students from diverse backgrounds. And then also thinking about, what are some of the examples of the bias that we're seeing, and how do we specifically tailor how we're mitigating for those biases specific to the examples. Like for example, we've seen that AI tools, if they're not calibrated correctly, they will give you incorrect data responses, specifically about students' ability to perform. So there are some AI tools, they're built into our education software programs. School districts are spending billions of dollars on these programs every year. When you see personalized instruction, it's not only the opportunity to take a test and the test spits something out. It actually tells you something about the child, right? And what resources and what data sets were used to train that algorithm in order to educate you about the child. And so one thing we know is that, and this is a study from Stanford University, and I am looking because I want to make sure I get it right. And educators, you can't say the wrong number. I've been an administrator in a district of 70,000 kids. I know we got to get it right. But studies indicate that AI can erroneously enforce stereotypes, reducing specifically Black students' recommendations for advanced programs by 40%. This is a Stanford University study. There's another study that came out that said the use of AI-driven education tools has shown to improve engagement and test scores for Black students by 25%. But here's when they are culturally relevant and unbiased, right? And so the impact is possible. There's so much we can do with AI, and I think this is some of what you'll hear from the panelists today. There's so much we can do. The possibilities are infinite, but there are so many opportunities for us to get it wrong, specifically for Black children, and I'm hoping that today's panel will give us an opportunity to talk through that. Another one of the solutions that I just want to skim over is the creation of standards, right? And ISTE has done a great job in starting to kind of open this door. We also see IEEE has opened some of the door to creating some of these standards. But I do think it's important to have standards specific to certain student subpopulations so that we can address specifically their needs and specifically cater to a lot of the studies that are now being done to show us the 25% of students that are able to be impacted if you have culturally relevant AI tools. The 40% of students that are left out of advanced course instruction if you're leveraging AI tools that are biased, right? And so creating those standards is critically important, and you cannot create those standards without all of you that are in this room, right? And I think that's the other piece that is really important to this conversation. You have a teacher, you have a forever educator and technology leader, and a mental health professional, right? And so you bring these three kind of segments together, and then you start thinking about what does the future look like, and how do we become a part of creating inclusive tools that really speak to the needs of our students.
Thank you. Do I need the microphone? Yes. That's what I get for asking some educators about it. Yes, you need the microphone. Okay, fine. I was trying to avoid this microphone. I'm here. I'm with y'all. So thank you, Dr. King. I want to pick up on both the data point that you shared and this need for standards and sort of this framework that is specific to the needs of Black children. And let me ask this question of the audience. How many of you are educators in classrooms or in school buildings? And so, okay, so quite a few. So I want to turn to you, Winston, and ask a question. Because, and as I mentioned, I was a teacher and care deeply about and love teachers, care very deeply about teachers and educators. And I know that educators have so much on their plates, right? And it can feel overwhelming to then have one more thing sort of added to you. It almost creates like an AI anxiety, because you're like, well, I have all these other things to do. Now you're telling me I also need to be concerned with the ethical design and use of AI. But Winston, as an educator who is in classrooms Monday through Friday, maybe even Saturday and Sunday, I don't know your schedule, but I know your commitment, so that's possible. Why should educators care about the ethical design of AI? And what responsibility do you think educators and school leaders hold in pushing for the ethical use of AI in education?
Well, I think the thing is, as a teacher, all of us, as educators, have to think about not the world like as it currently is, but the world of the future, what it's going to be like. So a lot of times my students, when they're, complaining about, some rule or something I have in class, I have to say, I'm not thinking about what 10-year-old you wants, I have to think about what 22-year-old you needs. And in the same way, we have to think about that when it comes to the professions and everything too. So I chose to teach financial literacy because I was teaching math for a while, for about 6 years, and I realized it was getting increasingly difficult to convince my 6th graders that they'd use a box of Whisker plot in real life. So I was trying to think about what do I know for sure that they're going to use in the real world, and that's financial literacy. So I went to my principal, pitched that program, and wanted to teach that to them because I knew for sure that they were going to need to use that in the real world. And then also, when looking at these different financial posts during the pandemic, all the comments were the same. Why didn't I learn this in school? Why didn't I learn this in school? I wish somebody taught me this in school. So, as an extension of my passion for practical education and preparing kids for the real world and giving them the skills they need to exist and thrive in the real world, AI is an extension of that. Recently, I think it was World Economic Forum predicted that 85 million jobs are looking to be replaced by AI, but 97 million are looking to be created by AI. So my question is always, which set of jobs are we preparing our kids for? And if we're not doing enough to prepare them for the latter, then that's a problem, especially when, another number here, when the average income is $48,000 a year, but the average home price is $412,000 a year. So the way I see it, we can't continue to prepare our kids for industrial era factory work when the world is moving to an AI and digital age. We have to do more in that regard. So yes, it is more work on teachers, but I think also teachers need the support from districts and the support from administrators to give them the PD and give them the development to be able to effectively implement these tools and put them in the hands of our students.
Yeah, so follow-up question, and I will just admit, Ken, I go off the rails. I get a script and I just kind of decide, let me see, what's the flow of the room? So I'm in a flow of the room moment. I want to follow up with that your response to sort of ask the panel, or maybe even bring the audience in, ask someone in the audience who may have some expertise here. In terms of, as school districts and school leaders are making decisions around what tools to bring into their schools, into classrooms, are there questions, is there guidance that could be provided? Maybe this builds on the standards comment you made, Dr. King. Guidance, questions that could be provided to educators so that when they're presented with these tools, they're able to sort of filter through and at least ask some questions that when they're then using them in their classrooms, they have information that's not just sort of what was sold to them by the is that?
Yeah, that's clear. Actually, Winston mentioned something yesterday, and I'm gonna put you on spot a little bit here. I thought it was really great. So he said he had a group of students, and he asked them, if you had access to all the information in the world, what would you do with it? Can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, I thought you were going to take my talking point for a second, but no.
I will.
Yeah, so, I wanted to kind of introduce my students to AI, and I asked them that very question as kind of the starting point. Before they even knew it was an AI lesson, I asked them, if you had access to all of the world's information, what would you do with it? And they were saying all these amazing ideas. Oh, I'd start $1 million business. I would, solve homelessness. I would, give that information to people who can access it. And then I flipped it on them and I said, actually, you can do all of those things. This lesson is actually about AI. And there's been no other time in the history of humanity where that's been more possible to do those things than right now. The funny thing is, not a single one of you said, with all the world's information, that you would do your English homework with. None of you said that. Even though you could. And I said, and the thing is, you could do that, and there is relatively little that Mission Hour could do to detect or keep you from using it on your English homework. Relatively little. But none of you said that. All of you thought bigger. And I said, that's the important thing to keep in mind when it comes to this technology. Whatever tool it is that you use, whether it's, the three main, large language models or the 1,000 AI tools that are going to make your life easier, I guess. But whichever tools you're using, think about how you can use them to think bigger and to solve the world's problems. When I was at ASU GSV a couple months ago, Bill Nye was one of the keynotes there, and he shared how AI is going to be used to desalinate the world's oceans, to solve for fusion energy and give everybody limitless electricity, Wi-Fi for everybody, deflect incoming asteroids. We're going to be able to work with AI to solve all these problems. And my concern is that when we're talking about, equity in AI, my concern is that the fear always overtakes it. I always wonder who gets to share in the equity of those problems being solved. And if we're not thinking carefully about that, then the people that are going to get to share in that equity have historically tended to look the same. And the people that will not will also tend to look the same as well. And we want to see what we can do to alleviate that. And I think the way to do that is to put the tools in the hands of our students and help guide them so that they're able to solve those problems.
Another point, it makes me think about, anyone familiar with Sir Ken Robinson? Like I literally, I can't talk about him enough. I can have a whole panel about Sir Ken Robinson. So he had this moment where he was explaining to an audience, he said, the way that teachers and people generally think of technology, that's related to when you had to light a match to make light in a room, right? And there was a moment, it took energy, you had to actually go do that and figure something out to make that happen. He said, and then there was a time when you flip a light switch and the light comes on in a room. And now what happens? You walk in, the room knows you're there, and the lights come on. Now, it's not smart enough to keep the lights on sometimes. You're like, after a few minutes, you're waving the light back on. But he said what we're doing from a pedagogy perspective, we're still teaching in a way that we have to walk in and light that fire, right? And kids are at a place where they're saying, I just walk in and the lights come on. What's the deal, right? And so now we're getting to that place with AI and creativity, innovation. Even if we go beyond AI, we're talking about robotics and esports and all of the other things that have to take place. We're getting to that point. How do we teach our kids to spot implicit bias? How do we teach our kids to think deeper about AI structure so that when they go to Midjourney and they type in, black male nurturing children and no one's smiling, they can identify that and say, oh, this is a bias in the algorithm. This is something I want to be a part of changing, right? There are 65% of the future workforce doesn't exist today. And there's a high probability that our students that are diverse and underrepresented, particularly black and brown children, will be left out of that very high percentage of careers that do not exist today. And the only way that we change that is by realizing that we're no longer at a place where we're lighting a match when you walk in a room. We're not lighting a match on AI. We're not trying to figure out the inception of it. What we're trying to do is now embrace the infinite reality that it's here, and there are opportunities to make sure that we get it right. Right? So that's.
And what I hear you both saying, and Jalen, I'm turning to you in a second just to give you the heads up, but what I hear you both, Winston and Dr. King, naming is, and again, it's this tension, right? So how do we make sure that the access to the technology is present and appropriate enough and safe enough so that Black children can use it in ways that solve for some of these inequities in solution design, the futures of workforce, right? So again, it's the holding of, we talked about this a bit last night, it's holding of these two truths. And I'm probably the person on the panel that's gonna be annoyingly focused in wanting us to be able to hold both of those at the same time, because I am Debbie Downer. I'm Debbie Downer. Because I feel that sometimes there's like two things that kind of happen. We're either spending so much time loving the problem that we never get to solutions, right? Or we're so like Pollyanna excited about how transformative something is going to be that we don't, again, pause and have this kind of conversation to say, but wait a minute, we know that when things, when transformation happens, in the housing world, they would call it gentrification. When that transformation happens, there are people who lose. And so what do we need to do? How do we continue to have this discourse to really sort of mitigate the loss and the harm that tends to happen to the same sort of group of people? So Jalen, kind of picking up on that point, as a mental health professional and a child well-being advocate, what are you seeing? What's resonating for you, but also like literally in your practice, as you work with children and families, what are you seeing in terms of how AI is impacting the well-being, the mental health of young people?
Yeah, so I see it from both sides, right? The mental health aspect, you see the fear and the anxiety that comes. It makes me think of how when the pandemic started, right? We were all trying to get into the flow of Zoom, right? We didn't know when to mute, we didn't know when to turn on. How many of us were truly confident when we first started implementing those types of technologies into the way that we lead and do our work? And so we're in that same kind of trend. And so we've talked about the biases, we've talked about the access, but we also really need to look at how are we building that confidence and that resilience within our children as they're starting to utilize these tools. Because we're seeing some of this fear and anxiety as well as imposter syndrome coming up in our classrooms and the ways that we deal with our mental health when kids are interacting with this because they are afraid of what that might look like. And some of the issues locally here that I've been worked on and kind of talked about is what does that privacy and surveillance look like? What is that access to equity, but also what does transparency and accountability look like when creating these tools so that we are making sure that we're catching these things as they are coming so that we can mitigate that and really give people access to what is happening in these trends that are changing.
Picking up on the accountability and transparency. Often in these conversations when we talk about sort of who's accountable, right? And I don't think it's just one group of people that are accountable, but we end up sort of talking through who's accountable for this transparency. And it often feels like it lays on the table of parents. Like, well, if you just go take 2 hours and figure out how to get to parental controls and turn something off, then your kid will be fine. And so and this is Jalen for you, but also for the panel, just want to sort of ask you to talk a little bit about this question of the accountability and who is accountable and how do we hold people accountable for ensuring the transparency that you spoke of, the ethical design of AI.
That is a very deep question. So I think that goes back to what Dr. King was previously saying, or what are those standards that we are creating, right? And so the Colorado Education Initiatives has done a partnership currently with the AI Education Project, really looking at the different ways that we can be accountable for the rollout of AI within education. And so what are those standards and conversations that we're having on the different levels to mitigate some of these things that are popping up? We know in certain things like with social media and with other technology things that popped up, we kind of got on the latter end of what was happening, especially with mental health. And so we really, at the different levels, need to make sure that we have a through line of communication with the implementation of what AI looks like at all levels, and communicating with all different people that we're interacting with, whether we're the developers, or we're at the district level, or we're in the classroom, because that feedback is going to be essential at all levels to mitigate some of these things that are popping up.
I mean, one thing I know is that education has always been a data-driven business. It has always been a data-driven operation where we think intrinsically about what we've seen, what we know to be true, and the direction we want to go. And we try to plan appropriately to do that, so we're impacting outcomes in a way that really makes sense. I always defer back to the research. There now is so much research specific to Black children and underrepresented student populations and the use of technology and the access to innovation and innovative technology solutions that I think we have a responsibility to be familiar with it, right? And it starts, for me, it starts there. There's also another starting point though for the developers. All of the accelerator programs, all of the technology companies and the angel investors and the folks that are investing funds into all of these different new technologies, the creation of these new technologies, they have a responsibility to say, hey, as a part of what I'm investing in, I'm requiring you, right, to be accountable to a standard that is diverse, that mitigates for the bias that we know we've seen across all these studies. It's not just a matter of saying, I'm going to put $10 million in your startup. Well, what are the requirements for that? How do I want to be a part of something for good in the development of these new innovations? And so I want to share a couple more data points with you. Black students are 2.5 times more likely to be identified for gifted programs when AI incorporates a broad range of performance data. That's an NYU study. Okay. That's important because we know the disproportionate number of Black students that are placed in special education. And a lot of the reasons for that, whether it is genuinely them raised to speak a certain way, or inconsistencies with the way that things are communicated, or the lack of cultural relevancy in state assessments. There's so many different reasons why, but we know that that bias exists. And so now, the study is showing us they're 2.5 times more likely to be identified as gifted, right? So if you just have an initiative to reduce the bias, the initiative is shown to reduce the bias by 60%. This is something we can mitigate for. It's not by chance that the bias is there. We have an intrinsic responsibility to ensure that we are activating the proper tools and resources to mitigate for the bias. The same way that we look at our curriculum before we do our lesson planning, the same way that we design our virtual programs, and the way that we spend all of our different funding sources if we're administrators here. That is the same responsibility that we have. So getting beyond the fear. When Sir Ken Robinson said, now you flip a light switch and then you walk in the room, right? There's a lot of people that said, oh my God, if you do that, the light bills are gonna go through the roof and the energy, and why would we ever? No, they just need to come in, flip the switch. It's manual, you know, the person who needs light, they tell you they need light. There were so many reasons why not to do that. But we advanced and pressed beyond that, and we did it, right? And we're still innovating it, because obviously we're gonna wave our hands in a few minutes. That's why I keep doing this. I talk with my hands to keep the lights on. So that's pretty much like, we have to really continue to stay close to the data and think about that in terms of how we want to see the world in the future.
So building on, I feel like we're kind of on this roller coaster. So we've spent some time honing in on the biases and the risks that are at play. And with the data that you shared, Dr. King, you're starting to take us into a bigger conversation about, you know, again, holding these two truths at the same time. What are the opportunities? And if there are places where we're getting it right, what are we learning? What are we seeing? And so, Winston, would love if you might share, as a teacher, you're an example of someone who is getting it right, how you're using AI in your classroom. And maybe if you have like a story or two, an example of how you're using it, even maybe what challenges have come out of it, what opportunities are also coming out of it.
I think the interesting thing is about AI, it's so ubiquitous that I don't necessarily even have to say, hey guys, we're all using AI, but you know I can. It will come up. I mean, I can overhear a kid say ChatGPT in class, you know, in 5th, 6th, 7th, or 8th grade, and I usually just pull them aside, like, hey, where'd you hear about that? What did you do with, like, things like that. But it will also just come up in projects. So one example I have is a student of mine who we were working on. I have all these like projects in my financial literacy class. They're like, Mr. Roberts, we got to do another project. We got to speak in front of people. I said yes, because that's something the robots can't do effectively yet. So we're going to make sure that we do that, and we're going to practice that. And I had one student who was, you know, had some learning challenges. He does have an IEP, but his name was Joseph, and he would. Oftentimes, if we had projects like this, like walk out the room, like not want to do it, not want to participate or anything like that at all. But one particular time we were doing this project, he started getting excited about it. And over the course of the week, he's like telling me, oh, Mr. Roberts, I want to add this to it, I want to add this to it. I'm like, okay, wow, all right, this is exciting. And when he gets up to present, I'm looking at his presentation and I'm hearing the things he's saying and I'm seeing the text that's up there. And it seems like really advanced for what he's got up there. I'm like, this is interesting. Because this looks like a 12th grader wrote it, and he's in 6th grade. So I'm having a conversation with myself, and I'm thinking, okay, did he possibly use AI on this? And at the time, I knew that most AI tools were blocked on our school network. So I'm like, it looks like AI, but I don't think he has access to AI. How did he do this? So I said, well, Joseph, in front of the class, great presentation. Seems a little bit advanced. Did you use AI on this? And he said, yeah, I did. So you're a teacher. You have a student who admits in class, in front of everybody, to using AI on a project. What do you do? I could have sent to the principal's office, I could have called home, can't believe what your son did, look at this, you gotta tell him he's cheating, but I could have done that. Instead I asked a question, what did you use? He said, I went to sentenceexpander.com. That's not ChatGPT, that's not Gemini, that's not Perplexity, that's not Magic. Can you show the class what you did? Yeah, sentenceexpander.com, and it expanded my sentences. So that's an AI tool that I wasn't aware of, so probably most of you were unaware of, but that exists, and he's using it in 6th grade without me having a discussion with him on AI at all, and it's already there. So that turned into a teachable moment, where I got to share with the class, like, hey, Joseph is actually an innovator. He's thinking ahead. He's in the future right now. This is what pretty much every employee is doing or going to be doing at some point. And he's already on that path. And I called home not to admonish him, but to say like, hey, your son is an innovator. And also, I feel like it's a win because a month ago, he would have been walking out of class and I told him he had to do a project. But instead, he's standing in front of his peers, presenting his findings on investing. It's a win, as far as I'm concerned. So I think that's an exciting opportunity to empower our students to be able to communicate in ways that their peers are going to understand and respect. And I think also when it comes to big picture, what that can look like if we're actually integrating this effectively into our curriculum and into our school systems. There is no reason that every single high school student can't walk across the graduation stage with a New York Times best-selling quality novel about their own life experience, ready to sell on Amazon the next day. There's no reason that can't happen with AI. But again, it's the transitioning your mindset from thinking, ooh, this is cheating, to actually how can we use this to help our students do more. So those are some of the possibilities I think I see with AI.
Yeah, I love that story. It reminds me of two things. Yesterday, one of the sessions I attended was on sort of the history of ed tech, and the presenter was going through a really interesting timeline of ed tech. And one of the comments he made was that he was quoting someone else, but I can't remember the person. But the quote, or the comment he was making was that students have been cheating for as long as school has been in existence. And so this like fear and idea we have of, oh my gosh, I know they're gonna start cheating. I mean, that's how a lot of us got through school. We cheat in some way, maybe not all the time, but every once in a while you look over at somebody's paper, your friend, and told them, and so I just thought that was hilarious that he said that, and then your story just kind of brought that home for me. Jalen, just talk to us a little bit about, as we're now sort of on this sort of hump of the opportunities with technology, with AI. And again, when we talk about health, mental health and well-being, we are often, because it's very serious, there are tremendously harmful impacts on young people, adults as well, but on our mental health and well-being from some of just the sheer use. Are there ways that you're seeing AI as helpful in your work?
Absolutely. And so I feel like AI has been a great place to create vulnerability, imagination, and possibility. And so some of the tools that we've been using are AI-generated games to help kids identify their emotions. What are we looking at different generated facial expressions that they can pick out? What games are we tailoring to their needs when we're looking at mental health, especially from a trauma-based, strength-based perspective. And so I've seen a lot of ways in which we can utilize tools to help kids get more active with communicating, but then also, personally, I've had to do virtual sessions with kids. And so how do we create containers for them to not have to worry about their circumstances around them, but truly focus and hone in on themselves and utilize these tools to identify and communicate in ways that they may not have before, but then also looking at their own ebonics and allowing them to have their own way of communicating in a way that is being received, respected, and honored.
Absolutely. Dr. King, I know that one of the projects you're working on, one of your 52 projects, is around supporting HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, both in terms of their access to the technology and the ability to diversify the pipeline. So as we've talked about with like the coded gaze, we need to have a diverse group of people actually creating the technology. And so will you talk a little bit about that strategy and sort of what's at play with this HBCU strategy?
Yeah. If you think about the data that I just mentioned, right, a lot of those sources were not HBCUs. Right? I don't think that's by chance. I think, not only have we underinvested in our HBCUs in a way that does not allow them to always have access to innovative structures.
Oh, you're right.
Thank you. But HBCUs have traditionally been under so much scrutiny from a perspective of accreditation that there is some fear sometimes of what they even include into their curriculum, right? As a part of making sure they're able to impact the future workforce in a way that's meaningful. So we've done some great work in T-Mobile with Tennessee State University. And there, I kind of call them like an incubator creativity space. We recently did the AI Summit with them, which invited about 40 different HBCUs. We have major corporations there, students. It was absolutely phenomenal. And what Tennessee State University is doing, they actually have the first African-American female esports winner with the NFL, which is really exciting for that. And we are the 5G provider for that work because traditionally HBCU campuses also struggle with infrastructure and ensuring that they have low latency internet experiences and broadband internet access that can really accommodate the innovation that they're trying to accomplish, right? So there's layers to this conversation. We're talking about AI, but if you don't have access to the technology and the connectivity and the bandwidth that's required in order to run these applications, then you're already in the last place. And so what Tennessee State University did was reach out to us and say, hey, we want to put 5G access in these particular facilities so that we can do AI research. So they are a leading AI research hotbed, looking at all of the different, from Magic School to, Mid-Journey to, they are partnered with all of these different AI sources to look for bias. And they have teams of students that are trained to look for bias. And they report out to these entities so that they can update their frameworks. It is a really phenomenal process that they put in place. They're also working with Apple Watch technology, so that they can look at athletics and kind of look at some of the trends with athletics and the health data, so that they can keep their athletes safe. They are working on some special robotics resources that have never been done. I mean, this is, if you would look up Dr. Robbie Melton, she's their CIO. She, I don't want to tell her age, but when I tell you she is world renowned for AI, one hand has nail polish that can dip into a drink and detect a date rape drug. The other hand can wave in front of her monitor and move things around mysteriously. She is absolutely a genius in the area of AI technology and innovation. And so, what T-Mobile has the opportunity to do, and what I and my team members that are in the audience have an opportunity to do, is really support innovation in a way that's unheard of, from drone technology to AI robotics. There's also another project that my team leads. It's a $10.7 billion initiative to bridge the digital divide. So when I talked about those layers, 50% of Black children lack access to efficient technology connectivity outside of the traditional school day. E-Rate did a great job. We've seen it over the years, right? It has really improved our technology infrastructure and campuses. 99.9% of schools have broadband infrastructure and are doing really great work in that area. But when students get home, there's still a divide. During the pandemic, right, we did a lot of great work in that area. When emergency connectivity funds are drying up, all the resources are drying up, the economy has changed the way that we spend. So there's so many different areas that we have to think about, but we still have to fix that situation. And so I would say, if you do have students that don't have internet access, at the core of all the conversations we're having, T-Mobile offers 5 years of no-cost internet access through Project 10 Million. And if your school wants to provide unlimited internet access, we work specifically with the school district. We work with state agencies, mayors, governors, state superintendents. It is literally the bane of my existence and all of the 8 other team members in this room. That is what we do to advocate for access to technology. And it's more than just the broadband, it's all the residual impacts of having the access that make all the difference. Those 65% of jobs, you can count them out if there's no access to technology and connectivity, right? And so that is the core of my work, and kind of the bane of my existence. But I think the conversation is just so much bigger when we think about AI technologies, and every single one of us can make a difference in the future of what that looks like for our children.
So I want to open it up to our audience to see if there are any questions, comments that you all have that you want to share. And Rebecca has been kind enough to volunteer to walk around with the microphone. So she will come to you if you put your hand up.
I just want to know, how do I access that for my students that might need that access? Where do I go to get that access?
It is t-mobile.com/project 10 million. t-mobile.com/project 10 million. Or you can just come to my LinkedIn and send me a message and I'll help you. I'll make sure I get you some help. It's K-I-E, I report E except after C. K is my last name.
I had a comment and a question. Earlier you mentioned about policy around AI, and I just wanted to say that a couple of months ago, and this is not like a grown and sexy comment, but a couple months ago there was an ed tech advocacy day in DC, and it was my first time attending. Apparently it's been going on a long time. Some people may know about it, but this was an opportunity for you to meet with your state legislation around E-rate, around the policies, the state and national policies for artificial intelligence. In that arena, there were 2 people of color, 2 educators. Now, again, I was invited by someone else because I teach I'm one of the coaches for the AI Explorations course, and she was like, you should come. And I was like, where is everyone? So when we talk about policy or how this affects our schools and our students, we need to be in the spaces to talk to the people that are making the decisions. And you guys are in, that type of position where you have, you can talk to your city councilman first, but then you can also talk to your senators, you can talk to your, councilmen. So really, it starts up there, but there's such a strong impact when we can talk about how do you we talk to them about funding for professional development, right? So Winston says he knows about how to teach his students, but he's one of how many teachers, Black educators, all educators really know how to teach their students about AI. So they need the money, the districts need the money to actually give them the PD that they need. So that was my comment, but my question is also about the HBCU connection and recruitment. So there are a lot of students in HBCUs, I do believe, are doing a much better job of offering programs for them, but what about trying to get some of them to be teachers? How are we bringing them into the classroom? So I live in Virginia Beach, and Norfolk State is there, and they're working on a program to try to recruit STEM majors to consider being teachers. And because that's really important, because our students, they need to see someone that looks like them. And they're typically younger, they know about Minecraft and all the things that I don't know what they're talking about. They know about all the TikTok things, they know about the sentence expander, right? So it's like, how do we help to recruit those very intelligent computer science majors, STEM majors, engineer majors to consider coming into the classroom to teach our kids?
So this is why I do a lot of policy advocacy. There is a bigger conversation around teacher compensation specific to economic situation that we're in right now. And I think that it becomes increasingly difficult to recruit and to inspire students that have those type of talents to come into the teaching profession. I do think it's critically important, but I don't want to overlook the fact that if you're a parent and your child has an opportunity to be a data science or a data science teacher, which could be an income gap of sometimes 100%, right? You may inspire your child to go the route of being a data scientist. And I wouldn't fault you for that. I think that, again, policy advocacy is critically important. And even if you're a teacher, if you have the opportunity to do that, do it. I love what you mentioned about, we have a responsibility as Black people to be in those spaces because we're generally not there. I think there's a different level to that though. If you're a district administrator, if you're a campus leader, if you're a state leader, right, how can you implore the people that are working under you to be a part of those initiatives and those conversations? I think that's a little bit different, right? When I had teams in the school district, generally I would try to ensure that I sent diverse teams there, even if they didn't think they were interested in AI. Because guess what? Sometimes when they go, it sparks something in them to say, I want to be a part of this conversation, right? They didn't mention me at all. None of what they said resonated with me. It needs to. I want to be a part of the conversation. And so I would just implore you that even if you're not a Black person, that if you have diverse team members, which we all should, inspire those team members, find the opportunities that you can send them to so that they can be exposed to something that may ignite a flame for them to want to make a change in the direction we're going.
Yes, just on the teacher recruitment piece, that's something that's very important to me. Also, as an HBCU grad, and as a teacher, this is something I actually been thinking about. I put a proposal together to that very issue about a few months ago. I think the thing is when I first went to my, I think one of the big charter school networks came to recruit down at Morehouse in like my freshman, sophomore year. I left out of that, so no, I'm never teaching. That's not what's going to happen at all. And I think the thing is, we have to change the pitch. We have to market the profession a little bit differently. And I think I've had some fantastic opportunities through KIPP to be able to innovate and do some interesting things. But it wasn't marketed to me in such a way that I was like, oh, I want to go do that. But if you had told me sophomore year that, hey, you can still wear your suits, you can create a brand for yourself, you can go to speak at conferences all across the country, be rubbing shoulders with billionaires, and have an Ivy League degree waiting for you, possibly. I'd have been, oh, wait, that sounds good. Wait, sign me up for that. So taking a career path like that and say, hey, actually, the education profession is a lot more vast and it's an area that's ripe for innovation. And for any, sit outside the business school at any HBCU, and any business student knows that where there's problems, there's solutions. And the money is made in the people who make the solutions. So say this is an area that is ripe for innovation. There's a lot of problems in education. So if you can bring that innovative mindset here, there's a path that we have for you. We've crafted a path for you to be able to innovate. It's a career path worth exploring. But I've got a full plan on that, so we can talk about it.
I just want to say that I went to Fisk University in Howard, so thank you. I had to put my HBCU love out there. I think this is so interesting, this change the pitch. You made me reflect on when I graduated from Fisk many moons ago. There wasn't we were having a very vocal conversation about AI. I think I literally remember the day we got a computer and email access that we all had to share at the computer lab. But aside from my story of how old I am, what you made me think about is the needing to change the pitch and how we might leverage technology, ironically, in creating this sort of new sort of PR for educators and what it means to go into the profession. Because what I do remember is the only organization that came and recruited, I was a psychology and child development major, so I knew I was going into the classroom. Teach for America was the only, that they came and they recruited heavily on our campus. And so it's just interesting when you were saying that, as I was thinking, wow, there wasn't any, and that we were in Nashville, but Nashville Public Schools didn't come necessarily recruit us, and so we were already sort of conditioned to go in a particular direction. And I think this idea of how do we leverage technology to sort of change the pitch and think about educators in a different way is just really interesting commentary. Any other questions or comments, as I know we're close to the hour. We have one here in the front.
Sort of to build on the point that Brady was talking about, how we get educators, Black educators involved in advocacy. I wonder what you all think about how we get parents educated about this, right? We talked about getting students aware of the bias in AI, but also the potential. How do we help parents know and really get them energized and know how to hold that tension between the fear and the possibility?
I guess just off the top of my head, I think it's all about, everything's marketing. So it's about getting the message out to them of why this is so important. Structuring for them that this has direct implications for your child's job opportunities down the road. One thing that we've done with Financially Lit, the lit stands for luxury is teachable, so you can follow it on the socials. But one thing we did with Financially Lit was we did a financial literacy night where we had 39 families come out on Thursday to learn about financial literacy, and we had our 8th graders teaching the younger students about doing a mini lesson for them about needs and wants and everything like that, while we gave tips to the other adults. We also did an event called Mother's Day Market where we had 287 attendees come out, 75 vendors from local businesses, some of our students running their own businesses, come to this market and buy and exchange goods and services, but also we had the business owners make sure that they were answering questions to the students about how they started their businesses. So we gave the students a packet when they came in of find a business that resonates with you and ask these questions to these business owners. So structuring things like that, community initiatives to involve the parents, involve the community, I think a similar model can be used in terms of AI literacy as well.
I love that you asked that, by the way, because we specifically had a conversation yesterday about infusing like the parent component in this conversation, and we knew it would be a whole nother panel. Parents are the core of how we think about students and their ability to like integrate into all of these different innovative resources. And in a lot of our communities, parents are afraid of AI, right? It's just a reality. They think it's like following them, it's listening to them, it's reading their face everywhere they go. It has more information than anything they've ever seen, and it's something that literally terrifies our parents in a lot of ways. I think there are opportunities for us to continue to educate our students, but we also need to make sure that we're teaching parents about their fears. Like, it's okay to be afraid of this particular technology. Here are some ways you can protect yourself, and here are some ways you can leverage it to do really great things. How do we incorporate that? The same way I use Title III funding to teach, parents English. I could do the same thing and integrate a little bit of AI resource and instruction so that we can help them to overcome their fears. So we can have a whole panel on that, but fantastic question. Can't talk about kids without parents.
So I know that we are at the hour. What I would just quickly sort of to summarize our conversation and bridge a little bit to your question about parents is that we have to remember that we don't have to collectively just sort of sit back and allow this technology to just be developed and then we have to figure out what to do with it. There is a role, and this is the advocacy policy role that we each can play and have to take on. We actually have to build the public will for any of these changes, these protections to happen. So we need everyone's voice. We also can't just depend on Black educators or Black parents to figure it out. We actually need all of you. We need everyone's voice at the table and everyone saying, you know what, we understand the power of AI. We understand that this can be something transformational for our students. And at the same time, we demand that you do not harm people in an effort to transform lives. And I think that's like the core message that we want to ensure that you all can take away from this panel. So thank you so much for being with us and enjoying.
We had such a great day at the ITSE conference and a riveting conversation on our panel, and we just want to thank you all for joining us.